So I just finished watching the Shudder exclusive puff piece, Dario Argento, Panico. It is a retrospective of the Italian filmmaker's life, and it is told through the man himself, those who knew him, those who were influenced by him. You have like Guillermo del Toro and Refn and Luigi Cozzi and Lamberto Bava and Michele Soave, who are people who are inspired by or worked directly with Argento in the heyday of Italian cinema. It goes back and it tells the story of his younger days and coming to be as a filmmaker, starting in the spaghetti western era, working under Bava, and then eventually his coming out party with the dawn of the popularity of the Giallo film. Four Flies on Grey Velvet obviously had the animal films in the beginning, before Deep Red, which was the first one that really exploded to a whole nother stratosphere, basically. And I did a review on Deep Red a couple weeks ago. It's interesting to see, because it's not a very long documentary. It's kind of broken down into the chapters of what we know of him as a filmmaker. There isn't much to be said about his youth. There isn't much to be said about those early films. It doesn't really kick in until we get to Deep Red, so that we can get to Suspiria, so that we can bring in the more modern Hollywood people like a Refn, who talks about the connection with Goblin and how he had stolen so much of the way that Goblin scored an Argento movie for his own movies. And if you look at something like the other one he did with Ryan Gosling, Only God Judges, I think was the name of it. You can tell there's a lot of influence of stylization of the color, and the music seems very influenced by Suspiria. But also he's a grindhouse filmmaker guy too. He uses a track in Farewell Uncle Tom, from Farewell Uncle Tom, in Drive, the other Ryan Gosling movie. And I remember seeing that in the theater and being like, where the fuck do I know this song from? I was like, oh shit, this is from Farewell Uncle Tom. That's an odd pull. Argento's career is very interesting because while I believe that he is probably the greatest Italian, well, not the greatest genre Italian filmmaker of all time. Let's get that out there, because I would put like a Fellini above him. But his films are very much, he became the master of horror in Italy through the Giallo, which is traditionally the Black Glove Killer style film. It's a more salacious twist, a more European twist on the popular American film noir film. It takes what was done in those American films and then just twists it and adds a level of perversity to it. And I think even when I said this in the Deep Red video, there's so many flavors of Giallo, but Argento was able to basically distill all of them down into one film for Deep Red, and then was able to take a lot of those elements and then add a supernatural beat to it with Suspiria, which I would say probably is his greatest internationally known film. That one really opened a lot of doors to getting more into the American scene, because it was also one of the first to have more known. Well, I don't know. Is Jessica Harper, was she really that known at that point? I mean, she's been in some of the amazing films, but like bringing in an outsider, so it didn't feel as much like. No, I guess that doesn't make sense either. See, this is what I get for not doing any research, because David Hemmings is in Deep Red. See, I don't know what I'm talking about at all. I'm just making it up as I go. And Hemmings had a name in England, and then he would go have a name in Australia. Doing a lot of international films. I always looked at it kind of like whoever was in Rome at the time, sort of like you look at the Japanese kaiju films, like why is Mick Adams in movies, like, well, because he was in Japan at the time. And I'm sure the producers were like, we want to play on 42nd Street, we want to play in Piccadilly Circus. We need to bring in some of these other faces that are more that have more cachet in America and stuff like that. Um, they kind of play down in this documentary uh, Daria Nicoldi's Argento's former wife, Aja Argento's mother, her connection to his success. I believe, aside from just being his muse, they met on Deep Red. Um, she was also integral to the creation of Suspiria. And I felt like they kind of play her down a little bit. What the documentary does, though, is it doesn't shy away from the very bizarre relationship that he has with his daughter, Aja Argento. But they justify the strange sex scenes and all that kind of stuff. Because as they're building this thing up, they talk about other actresses who he had very negative experiences with, especially the lead from Opera, because she wouldn't show her breasts on screen. And he basically shunned her and treated her very coldly. But she said that helped her performance. Again, this is why I say this is a puff piece, because I feel like there's a lot more underlying there. And how he treated his daughter, even when Asia Argento wasn't in his film The Card Player, because she was directing her second ever feature. Her father didn't speak to her for a couple years, and when she won an award later on, he had never won an award like that, and he was like, it doesn't matter. All that matters is getting the film made. And while I agree with that, I would much rather make a whole bunch of movies than get a fucking award. Um, there is something there to a man with an ego who has to make it far more about him. Is he a genius? I believe he is in a lot of senses, but I also believe that without certain people around him, um, his brother, who was was a writer and a producer with him, and certain other producers, and Goblin being together, because they broke up in like '78, and there was only pieces of them that came together to work on stuff. I really think that his last truly fascinating film is Tenebrae. Tenebrae works almost as a clapback to how Argento was treated by the media, blaming him for violence when he's just like, I'm an artist. I'm reflecting the world and I'm showing you my dark thoughts on film. What people do with that is not my problem, And while I agree with that thing, I think that we're far too, it's not the artist. The artist has an obligation to tell their story, and how other people perceive that story is on them. Like, should we be putting ugly, vile, sacrilegious images out there? Well, yeah, because the world needs that shit sometimes. We look at violence and we look at horror to remind us, it's like a fucking roller coaster ride. Like, we're gonna face death, but when the credits start, we get to walk away from it, And I feel like blaming video games, blaming heavy metal music and all that shit, it's a much easier way than to ignore the problem than it is to actually face the problem, that there are fucking crazy people in this world, all over the world. And instead of dealing with mental health situations or having frank discussions, it's just easier to point a finger at something that's shiny and go like, oh, little Dario Argento did it, So Tenebrae is a very, very interesting film in that regard. It takes the psychosexual perversion from from films like Deep Red, and then twist them even more into its narrative for its for its end result. That's the last one I believed he worked with his ex-wife on. And John Saxon's great in that one, but like they definitely downplay the wife's involvement. But the filmmakers, the other people in it are honest, and that's what I really enjoy. That's what one part that I did enjoy about it, where I can look past a bit of the puffness to it, by going like, yeah, his daughter said fucking warts and all. Like, it was super uncomfortable shooting violent sex scenes, with her father there, and he made her cry and stuff like that, and he made that other actress cry, and a set is supposed to be a safe place You know, the actor's job is to give the director what they need, but you don't have to be like fucking Kubrick was to Shelley Duvall. You know what I mean? Like you're not there to break these people. I believe if everybody's on the same page, you can get what you need from your actor without being Genghis Khan. You know, but you know, I'm not a professional filmmaker. I don't know. Uh, and then they also face one of the other things I did enjoy about the movie was when you get past Tenebrae and opera. And again, Tenebrae has some fantastic shit in it, man. Tenebrae is so it's a straight return back to Four Flies on Grey Velvet, where it's not going for the style over substance as much, but the style shines in it because it doesn't have the crazy lighting and it's not set in darkness. It's actually set in mostly daylight, and there's a lot of more stark whites to it, and it gives a lot of these scenes a bit more texture. Then there's that great fucking shot where the camera kind of goes up past the window and around the house, and it's ghostly. It's like the you know, the killer's yeah, you know, the killer's view is almost like that of a raven, where it's able to be anywhere at any time, and you know, and then you have that great fucking kill where the girl has the her arm cut off and her blood sprays, and it's almost like avant-garde art. And you have the slash across the shirt at the one point, so you're seeing her eye through it. It's like there's a lot of cool little pieces of pop art like that carry. You see the through line directly from Deep Red to Suspiria. Inferno, I like Inferno. That was one of the scripts that I wrote for Monster Mania, for that other channel, where you know it's phantasmagorical. It's not quite to the level of Suspiria. The lighting is far more. There's less reds and yellows and far more greens and purples and blues in it, and it does not work in, you know, while Suspiria has that idea of like it's working on a sort of dream logic, you can at least wake up from that one. Inferno is just full tilt boogie when it comes to the dream logic, and I think that one's hurt a lot by the fact that he was obviously going with for a Hitchcock vibe with it. You know, because like in Psycho, we bump off our main character early on, and then we're following another character. Another one that does that is Razorback, the Australian outback giant boar movie. We kill like three characters before we figure out who our main character is. This one, we get rid of our main character, and then we're following someone else, and there's not enough time to really be committed to this person to really follow through on where we're going to go with the story for us to finally let ourselves engage in the lucid dream aspect of it. I feel like if they were introduced a little bit earlier and we followed that through line a little bit more, we could follow that first person's you know, delusions into the other side of the story. So that one feels disconnected, but I think there was also American money involved in that one. But I do love you know, they called me death, and the woman in the mirror pushes, and then the fucking Grim Reaper pops out behind it. That's such a great, like, visual pop. I really, really enjoy that one. There's like weird shit in it, but it's like in all the Italian movies. Like, I'm gonna go down into this crypt where there's a fucking haggard dude, you know, with boiling pots, and I'm gonna ask him how to get in there. No, I'm gonna get the fuck out of there, you know. Or all the scenes underwater with the dead bodies and stuff, and then the cats and all that kind of stuff. It's definitely like, it's definitely a fever dream put to film, and I think you have to be in that mindset in order to fully commit to it. Yeah, you've got Tenebrae, which I've spoken of quite a bit more. I mean, what is there to say about Suspiria, really? You know, the Technicolor aspect of it, and the musical score, and Jessica Harper's big eyes, and how everything is slightly larger in the movie to give it a bit more scale, so she almost is more like a child. A lot of times you can notice that like the door handles are a little bit higher, or the bed, and the way she's shot is supposed to make her look smaller, almost like she's a child. And like little things like, you know, names that start with S, or that for snakes, and then they're giving each other raspberries and shit like that. Like there is a childlike quality to it, where it's the most like a grim fairy tale, you know. And again, this is Argento with his wife at the time, putting these kind of these fairy tales on film, and that's why a lot Guillermo del Toro speaks in it, because he does very similar things. He puts these childlike fears and these kind of grim fairy tale angles into all of his stuff as well, which I think is really cool. I like opera. I think opera's fine, but when you get past that into like you know, the Card Player and Stendhal Syndrome, which is fine. It's definitely a little bit headier than some of his other stuff. Trauma. Do you like Hitchcock? What the fuck else did he make? They don't talk about Dracula 3D. I don't know why. But they do. They bring up the fact that like, what the fuck happened? What happened to this dude? Because Sleepless is essentially just a soft remake of Deep Red, you know. And they ask him, he's like, well, you know, his father died, and in the '80s things changed and budgets changed, and I agree with all of that. The giallo as a whole, the market had completely moved on past it. The Italian film market is not what it used to be at that point. The Italians, the American style slasher film was now where horror was going. So there wasn't really as much of a place for what Argento was doing. It was the same thing with with all of them, with Bava, Lamberto Bava, going in doing movies like Demons that had more of like a heavy metal vibe to them. Fulci went way more into like 42nd Street Grindhouse style than he had done before. Michele Suave, I think, was the one who came out, and he obviously ended his career early. But you have something like The Church, or you have something like Cemetery Man. Cemetery Man is fucking beautiful. I think Cemetery Man might be the last great Italian horror film. It's Terry Gilliam and Tim Burton adapting this really weird, cool Italian comic book. So there's this like gothic, twisted but quirky sense of comedy with a British lead and a full European vibe to it, and the gore is fantastic, and it's also a romance. Like Cemetery Man is definitely in my top 5 favorite Italian horror films ever made. I think it's absolutely fucking brilliant and beautiful, and I caught it one night on late night TV when I was in middle school, and I had no clue what I was seeing. But this was in an age before the internet, and I'm like, what the fuck is this movie? And I remember asking the guy at the video store, and I'm like, yeah, like the guy from that Julia Roberts movie is having sex with this girl on her husband's grave, and the husband comes back, and he's like wrapped in like vines, and he bites her, and the guy's like, I have no fucking clue what you're talking about. And they're like, yeah, the girl dies on a motorcycle, and the mentally challenged guy takes her head, and then there's zombie Boy Scouts, and in the end they're in a fucking snow globe, and every place I asked, they were just like. And it wasn't until dial-up internet that I finally figured out what the fucking movie was, and I was like, finally, I've been thinking about this for years. But they talk about, him changing, and they go, oh, his films changed because he changed. And I don't agree with that. I think that with age comes wisdom, but with age also comes a desire to regain one's glory days. And I feel like he continued to make these type of movies because that's what people expected from him. So he wasn't pushing anything more than the name Argento at that point. Because while things like The Card Player or Stendhal Syndrome or, Dark Glasses, I think was the last one, they have flares of who he was, but they just feel hollow. They feel like somebody, they feel like somebody who like stopped caring about what they were doing years ago, but they're forced to continue to do it because it's what pays the bills. They're trapped in being that character, and that sucks, because I believe that he had visions of things to put on camera. And what's so amazing about his earlier films is it is like psychotropic, cocaine fueled pop art. His films felt tactile. That's something I say on this channel a lot, but I love a movie where it feels like there's a reason for everything to be where it is. There's a reason for the camera to be where it is. And fuck you don't have to understand it as the viewer because it's in the director's head. He gets it. He gets it on a subliminal mind fuck kind of way. And there's a lot of that in Deep Red, which I find so fucking interesting. But there's also just a lot of little things, like even in Suspiria when like the fucking bird flies over the the courtyard and it makes the dog fucking rip the dude's throat out. Shit like that. It's like evil is ever present. Evil has wings. Evil can be wherever, whenever, because it's a presence. And that's what I liked so much about his movies is they weren't tied to anything more than his own imagination. And it doesn't matter if you understand it; he understands it, and maybe subconsciously you understand it on a dream like level. And that's why I feel like he elevated the Giallo. But then he finishes up the Three Mothers trilogy with Mother of Tears, which is just awful. And that's kind of when you go like, all right, this is a contractual obligation. This is not something that his heart is actually in. I would like to see one more true Dario Argento film. I would like to see one of an old man facing his own mortality and having a whole lifetime of baggage and to bring along with him for something like that. The documentary ends pushing in on him and he's dour and he just smiles. It's like the whole the god of king of fear in Italy and all this kind of stuff. I feel like a more fantastical, honest horror, psychological thriller giallo from him that is not playing to what we expect. It's playing to what is in his black heart, and I don't know if we're gonna get that. But this was an interesting documentary to say the least because it is a greatest hits thing. It's cool to hear, what a Michele Soavi, what a Lamberto Bava, what all these other filmmakers who are still with us have to say about these types of films, and Salmonetti as well from Goblin, and how his Argento's influence completely changed their career path. But it is puffy. It is a little bit of a jerk off session. But they did touch on some of the things I was like, well, they're not going to touch on that. They're not going to touch on what the fuck happened to him post opera. They're not going to talk about like how weird it is that he films like these brutal sex scenes with his daughter, but they did, And for that, I at least appreciate the honesty that they were able to put into it. And you can't take away that those films that we know him for are going to forever stand the test of time because they're always going to be discovered by new people, and there's always going to be something in them which is going to be extremely interesting to different types of horror film fans. You have the auteur, you have the person who's looking at it from like, without Argento, we don't get Carpenter and we don't get De Palma. But without Hitchcock, we don't get any of them, it's interesting. I guess I liked it. It is subtitled because most of it's in Italian. Just letting you know that. I have nothing but respect for Argento. I feel like he's a strange dude. He's a conflicted dude, but most great artists are, and I don't feel that there was some Faustian deal and it's like, okay, well, you've made these great films and now, your punishment is you're going to make tons of Dracula 3Ds, with a CGI praying mantis that Dracula turns into. That movie's fucking awful. If you've never seen that one, holy shit. But no, I just think I think apathy set in, and as an artist, just that idea of this is the only type of things that people will accept from me. At one point, I was able to I was able to make my footing with the Four Flies on Grey Velvet and such, and then I was able to break that with Deep Red and do something so much more pop art. And then I was able to take that one step further and go fucking Technicolor with Suspiria. And then from there, people had an expectation of what his films were supposed to be. And he rode through the 1980s and into the 1990s. And by the time opera hit and the realization of what the industry was there and the realization of what people expected from Dario Argento was there, he kind of lost his mojo. But again, influenced so many, and his films will stand the test of time forever, and I hope we get one more out of him. So if you have Shudder and you are a fan of Italian cinema and Dario Argento in general, I would definitely say check it out. I wish there was a bit more warts in it, but there is enough warts and all to have gone, okay, they touched on this thing that I didn't think that they would touch on, so good for them. And it's always good to hear, people like Guillermo del Toro, who I respect the fuck out of, gushing over a filmmaker who inspired them, and again, I've said it in other videos, like, I remember so distinctly discovering Giallo for the first time and discovering the Italian cannibal films and the Italian zombie movies and just being repulsed, but also, like, so sucked into it. I was saying the auteurs, you have the auteurs, sorry, you have the auteurs, you have the gorehounds, and then somewhere in the middle, those two things meet, and you have a Dario Argento who was making things that were a bit headier and more art house than a Fulci, that's a mark of his brilliance, that even when he was making the things that people just wanted, the murder set pieces, he was still able to put some of that art house into it. Not to say, like, again, Fulci, fucking fantastic. Fulci was a working man's filmmaker. Fulci was a filmmaker who, was there. Okay, what do you want? You want a zombie movie? All right, we're gonna do a zombie movie. I want to make this like Lovecraftian thing. Oh, the German producers say there have to be zombies in it. Sure, there's gonna be zombies in it, but I'm gonna create something of my own into that. But it never. I don't think Fulci ever wanted to be Hitchcock. I think Fulci just wanted to be Fulci. So it's like the Michael Jackson versus Prince thing. I know I've talked about that before, Coke or Pepsi or whatever. Who do you like better? If you're going for more of like a Technicolor, psychedelic kind of, disco synth vibe, you're gonna go with Argento. But if you're going with like a mean-spirited, kind of competently shot, dreamlike setting, you're gonna go with Fulci. It's just how this stuff works. But so Dario Argento, Panico, literally just pressed stop on the credits and started recording. So I'll probably have more thoughts after all this is said and done. Coming back from Ohio last weekend, and I think I got sick from the con, but I'm trying not to, so I'm taking stuff. My throat's so fucking dry. And got home, a 7-hour drive home on Sunday night, back home, fell asleep at 10, woke up at 12, fell back asleep again, up at 4, then up at 7, now it's 9 o'clock at night, and I've been at work since 8 o'clock this morning. So it's been a long day already, but I wanted to shoot this video out because I had things to say about it. So let me know what you thought if you checked it out. Let me know what you think of Italian horror films. Let me know what you had for lunch today. I don't care. It's anything for the algorithm, Have a good one.